What do you say to a loner in a tree? Can I come for tea? Jesus is about to enter Jericho. But before he does, Luke tells us about a man called Zacchaeus he'll meet there. Luke gives 3 details about Zacchaeus. He's a chief tax collector, he's wealthy, and he's short. That Jesus will encounter a tax collector in Jericho isn't surprising. When the Romans occupied Judea, they divided it into 4 regions. They then insisted that duties be paid on goods carried across these borders. Zacchaeus was employed by the Romans to collect these taxes. That made Zacchaeus a public hate figure. Like Levi, who we met earlier this term, Zacchaeus was in league with the Romans. He'd made himself very rich collecting taxes for them. Tax collectors were allowed to pocket a proportion of the tax for themselves. Zacchaeus would have been seen as corrupt and greedy, a scavenger who didn't mind getting rich off his own people's misery. We're given one further detail about him. He's short. The fact that Zacchaeus stands out morally and physically makes him a pantomime villain. He's conspicuous, an easy figure to point out and despise. To most people in Jericho, Zacchaeus is that horrid little man, condemned by the hole he dug all by himself, and constantly reminded of it by those who recognise and distance themselves from him. Zacchaeus is loathsome, friendless, and hopeless. But now he hears that Jesus is on the way. And like the crowd, Zacchaeus wants to see him. He's probably drawn not only out of curiosity, but because in Jesus he somehow senses the magnetic power of God's love. But Zacchaeus' combination of shortness and notoriety mean that, if he's even to glimpse Jesus, he must climb a tree. Here's how Luke describes what happens next. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." Turns out Jesus knows exactly who Zacchaeus is. But notice the honour Jesus shows him. Jesus respectfully uses Zacchaeus' name. He also addresses him whilst he's in the tree rather than at street level. Jesus speaks up to Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus' height meant he spent his life being spoken down to by others. Now Jesus places himself in the position of weakness. Then Jesus does something extraordinary. He requests hospitality from this tax collector. As we've seen throughout this series, in Jesus' culture, sharing a meal with someone indicated friendship. So Jesus' words extend intimacy and acceptance to Zacchaeus. Indeed, in making this offer, Jesus deflects his shame and scorn onto himself. Now it's not Zacchaeus who's the big scandal in Jericho anymore. It's Jesus. And yet, Jesus willingly takes on Zacchaeus' shame. Why? Jesus knows what Zacchaeus has done, yet he wants him as a friend. And for this man, that changes everything. Having welcomed Jesus into his home, he shows he's a new person. "Look, Lord," he says, "here and now, I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I've cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." It's remarkable. To this point, nothing had been able to persuade Zacchaeus to change path. Not public cold shouldering, not his parents' pleas, not his nagging conscience. But now, a meal with Jesus causes Zacchaeus to embark upon a U-turn. Why? Zacchaeus' story shows how we're able to see a whole new way forward when we know we're wanted, just as we are. Knowing we're wanted allows us to face ugly realities about ourselves. It's from the safe place of being wanted that we can breathe and make changes. We see this in our own friendships. When someone shows they want to spend time with us just as we are, we can relax. And when we know they're really for us, we feel able to drop the guard. Around them, we feel safe to admit even the dark parts of our character. Feeling wanted is powerful, but it's much more powerful when you realize that you're wanted by the living God. Zacchaeus had probably heard Jesus' offer of forgiveness and love before the day he climbed the tree in Jericho. But he clearly always assumed that his die was cast, that his record excluded him from Jesus' offer. Certainly how other people made him feel. For this reason, Zacchaeus always lacked power to change the things in his life that were wrong. He never felt safe enough to cut himself loose. He probably felt like he was trapped. But as Zacchaeus now experiences the welcome and affection of Jesus and feels firsthand the forgiveness and love of God, everything else falls into place and his heart is changed. In verse 9, Jesus uses one word to describe this change: salvation. The Christian good news is that God offers salvation on the basis of Jesus and his death, and not in any way because of what we contribute. Yet like Zacchaeus, once we're truly accepted, knowing Jesus will inevitably make a difference. When we experience salvation in this way, we can't help but be transformed. After all, when we know that Jesus will give everything for us, even at our worst, to the cost of paying our debts at the cross, we find that in response, we want to give our best to him. There may not be many CU members who need to pay back those they've cheated from, but a deep experience of salvation continues to transform those who follow him. It's powerful enough to break habits, to give us fresh willpower to drop old ways of doing things, and reassures us all the way along that we're forgiven and loved, even as we try and fail. How has being found by Jesus transformed you? Do you know the life-changing, earth-shattering, priority-shifting love of Jesus? If not, know that Jesus welcomes you. He looks up to you and offers you himself. And knowing that love, just imagine the impact that same love could have on campus today as it spills out to others in the weeks and term ahead.